still recovering from heat stroke, heat exhaustion after this last couple of weeks? All right, that's a good deal. We're going to be in Mark chapter 14 today, if you want to go ahead and turn there. Mark chapter 14, that's where we're going to start. We know that Jesus and his disciples are on their way to the Garden of Gethsemane. On the Mount of Olives is where it's located. You have to look at all three synoptic gospels and also in John to find out the whole story. Go ahead and pull that door stop, if you would, please. I had a discussion this morning with someone who said, a preacher told him once a long time ago, if you didn't hear children during the sermon, that you're a dying church. So, I love hearing those babies. So, it's not going to distract.
You're glad that you don't have that infant yourself.
Yeah, you're right. We've already gone through that, and I've tried to always tell the moms, hang in there. They will start growing. They will get better. They will start behaving. You just got to. It takes time. I know ours. We had one that we had to haul out every 15 minutes, for years. And then he finally got to be pretty good. But Creston didn't give us much time. That tells you which one it was. Creston was pretty good. I remember him telling his brother, you have got to be out of your mind. Don't you know that's going to get you in trouble? And he would sit back and watch the older one get in trouble. And he didn't. So, but yeah, he was sneaky. That's right. Creston was sneaky growing up. So Zach wasn't. And Zach would not tell you a story. I don't think I've ever caught Zach in a story or a lie to me. If he did something, he would tell you straight up front, and then he would stand there and just look at you and dare you to do anything about it. But he always told the truth and was always own up and confessed that whatever he did. So even when it was to his little brother. So, all right, we're going to start in Mark 14. We're going to start in verse 32 is where we're going to be at. This is when Jesus and his disciples are on the way. And we go back and look at Matthew's account and of Luke's account, because if you just let someone read, or you read to someone and you're trying to teach them and just use one of the Gospels, it's going to leave some information out. It takes all of them to get all the information on what happened that night when Jesus was arrested. Who arrested him? Who was with him? What did he say? Where did he go? You've got to use all of them. It's like that accident that happens if it happened right out here at this highway when you're coming off the Blacktop Road, and there was 10 of us out there that saw it, and we all wrote down what we saw. Every incident would be different, and some would leave some things out that others saw, and depending upon the angle you're at, you may not see something else that happened. So you wouldn't even know to put it in your story, would you? So you have to use all the Gospels. Someone, if they would, start reading in chapter 14 in verse 32, and we'll stop at 41, please, from 32 to 41.
Then they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch. He went a little farther and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible to you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Then he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again he went away and prayed and spoke the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. Then he came to them the third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going, seeing my betrayer is at hand.
Okay. Now, if you go back to verse 35, and that's what Steve led this morning for invitation song, and he calls his father Abba. And I mentioned that that is the term that small boys or small children used for their fathers. That means that Christ had a very intimate relationship with his heavenly Father, just like we are supposed to also. Aren't we called his children? Now, it's been a long time since somebody called me a child, but I consider myself a child of God.
Children of light.
How many of your kids that you still call children, you can still consider them as your child? I don't care how they get. You can be 90 and they can be 60 or 70. You're still going to call them your child. You will still refer to them that way. That relationship never changes with a father and a parent, or a child and a parent. So, okay, let's turn back right quick and see what Matthew says about this same account and how he saw this. Let's turn back to Matthew 26. Matthew 26. And if someone were starting in 36 and read down through 46, 10 verses here. There's a little bit more information here to be given. Matthew 26, verse 36. Someone would like to read that?
Then comes Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and said unto the disciples, Sit you here while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then said he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. And he went a little further, and fell on his face, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he comes to his disciples, and finds them asleep, and says unto Peter, What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them, and went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then comes he to his disciples, and said unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, and let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me.
All right, let's turn to Luke 22. Luke gives us a little more information. We know that they're in the garden. Twice they use the word in the garden of the Gethsemane, right? Well, where was that? Luke is going to tell us exactly where that was at in just a second here. Plus, there's going to be a little bit more information about where Jesus was and where he left his disciples at. So we're going to be in Luke 22, verse 39. So we're going to start there. Someone read there, please.
Coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives, as he was accustomed.
All right. Didn't say anything about Gethsemane here, did it? It said he went to the Mount of Olives here. Okay, go ahead.
And his disciples also followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, Pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. When he rose up from prayer and had come to his disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. Then he said to them, Why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation.
Look at what we know that they stopped in the group that's with him stopped in 3 different places. Who did he have stop at the first place? Who all stopped there? The disciples. That could mean some of the apostles, which it did mean some of them, but it means also some of his followers were with him, right? All right. Who did he take with him according to Mark? Peter, James, and John went a little further with him, didn't they? Separated from the other group. Of course, that was his closest inner circles, was those three. And then Jesus even went further than that. He's told them to stay here and you pray by yourself. What would have happened if they'd have stayed with the rest of the disciples?
Been distracted.
What do you do when you get in a group? You talk and talk about other things, and you don't concentrate on the task at hand sometime, right? It was important to Jesus that these three, his inner circles, spent some time in prayer, because they have no idea what's about to happen to them, happen to him and to them both. Yes, ma'am?
Do you think there's any significance why he called out Peter and Simon's name?
Yes, those three, Peter, James, and John.
Why he called out Peter and Simon is the same person, right?
Right, Simon Peter. It just depends on who's translating.
Why he chose him out of the three? Why did you think he chose him?
Who was going to be the spokesperson that brought the gospel to all the people in the world on the day of Pentecost? He's that important to Jesus. That's why he called him. Why did he call John? He was the one that he loved. He was probably the closest to Jesus of any of the three. And he could trust him and depend upon him. All right? And the other one was a brother. All right? Brothers go together. That's just the way it works. Okay? So how far did Jesus go from Peter, John, and a stone's throw? How far is a stone's throw? Not real far. I can pick up a rock and throw it from here to the highway, probably. Pretty easy. But Jesus had to be separated from them too, because we know that how many times did Jesus separate himself from everyone else just to recharge himself, just to have a talk with God?
Often.
We're told over and over and over. He sometimes got in a boat and left them. He sometimes went over the mountain and left them. He sometimes just totally disappeared, which drove the apostles, I think his disciples crazy, and his apostles, the apostles that were crazy, because they didn't know where he was going. And he would all of a sudden appear back. But he tells them each time, I have got to spend time in prayer. And prayer was very important to him. Luke's account tells him how fervently his prayer was. And I've heard people say that he prayed so hard that he was bleeding. That doesn't say that. What does it say? If you've been in a hole like I was the day before yesterday when Scott's faucet broke in his backyard, water, and it was noon, 105 degrees, and I have my head and hands down in a hole, I guarantee you I'm sweating like Christ did. I have to take my glasses off. It's pouring over my glasses. I can't see anymore, and it's just totally dripping, and I'm trying to keep it dry to put glue on PVC pipe, and I'm dripping on it and sweating on it. That's how he was sweating. We've all done that sometime in our life, sweat so hard that it's just pouring off of you. So I've seen that.
I just have a comment. I feel like probably most of us read this general chapter in one of the Gospels, hopefully fairly often. But if we're not careful, we rush to the actual trial and crucifixion and all that. But, these parts we just read, especially when you read all three of them together, you see how he didn't want to do this. And, and when you look at, I believe it was...
Tell me, why do you think he didn't want to do this?
Well, he knew what was going to happen. He knew what his...
Why was he afraid of that? He's God.
Yeah, but he's also man. And,
Exactly.
where he talks about, oh, my Father. He wasn't just saying, oh, Father. Sometimes we get we start praying, he was begging, oh, my Father.
I think that's the tone. He was begging his father not to let... Did his toe still hurt when he stumped it, just like ours? And we know what he goes through. We're not gonna get to that. I have not seen next week's lessons in the new group of lessons that we've got coming up for the quarter. I don't know what it's going to be because I'm not going to be teaching it. Scott's going to be back in here next week. But we know of what he went through and the pain. And I was talking to someone last week, and they've done a lot of people have done a lot of research on what the Romans did to people that crucified them, and how they whipped them, and how they beat them, and the things that they used. They had leather with balls and with razor like sharp edges that they just rip you apart. And they just didn't hit Jesus on his back. You know, we see a lot of stuff he's just scourged on his back. It was all over his body, his face, his head, every place that you could think of, because they had him nude, hung up, strung up, where he couldn't move, and they just continued to beat him. You could imagine going through, and I can't imagine going through something. We've all had pain. Every one of us had pain. And pain, for you ladies that know and go through childbirth, it is incredible pain. Have a kidney stone, it is incredible pain. It puts you in the floor and you can't do anything. We've had gallbladder problems. We have broken bones. We've been in car wrecks. We know what pain is. We have no idea what pain is being beaten like this. He is not hidden, is he? Because we're gonna see in a few minutes, where did Peter find him? He's in a courtyard where people, an audience, can watch this happen.
You know, he was going through so much, and he's asking, you know, take this away from him. But unless I'm mistaken, I think Luke is the only one of those three versions that tell about the angel coming to strengthen him.
Right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because that's why you've got to read all of these to get the whole entire picture. You can get parts and pieces of it, but you got to read it all to get everything in there, and that's what we're doing here.
Well, and he wasn't just thinking about himself. I mean, yes, obviously, I'm not saying he's selfish about that at all, but he was also worried about his disciples when he's gone. He knew what was going to happen to them when he was no longer there. And so that piece was also preying on his mind of just, they're going to be left kind of defenseless when I'm gone, and things are going to happen to them. And
sure.
So, I mean, it was a lot.
And he also knows, he's already told them, you're going to be put to death too. He knows because of what he is asking them to do, it's going to cost them their lives also. Have you ever been told or ever told somebody, you look like you have the weight of the world on you? Jesus had the weight of the world on him, literally. He did. Not just his generation, but for all of mankind that has in the past, the present, and all that will be coming into this world. He had all that weight on him, their sins. That's incredible weight. Now we have struggle. We struggle with having lots of weight on whether it's our business or families or financial or whatever. We all struggle with the weights and concerns about what's going to happen to us, don't we? And does it get us down to the point where we almost can't function sometimes? You can't think straight. You can't do things straight. You forget things. It just stays on your mind so hard. What was Jesus's fix for that or cure for that?
Talking to his Father.
What did he tell us to do with our burdens? Put them on him. Jesus could handle it, and he did handle it. It cost him his life to do it, but he said, give them to me. I can lift these weights, these burdens from you. Life is difficult as is. He's always told us it was going to be. But put it on me and let me do the worrying for you. Yes, sir.
It costed every day of his life for us. And another thing, Jesus was 100% flesh.
Sure.
1 Timothy 2 tells us the man Jesus Christ. And we need to realize that nothing was taken away because he was the Son of God.
Nope.
And he suffered, and then he's 100% spiritual, 100% flesh. That's why he had to take that to heaven to be a mediator.
Right.
That made him a mediator. He couldn't just today, our experiences, some of our greatest preachers come out of prison.
Sure they do.
I seen one Lewis was talking about, what was his name? Clyde Thompson.
Clyde Thompson.
Yeah. And if you read his story, you know how many people he reached? He reached over 250,000 out of prison.
Sometimes it takes you to contact or to connect with people. You have to be through the same experiences, don't we?
You got to know them.
You got to know them. So there is people that you can talk to in your life that I could never even they wouldn't even give me the time of day, but they'll talk to you. Yes, ma'am.
I think the physical part of him was that he didn't have to go through that.
Has to be.
Somewhere in the spiritual part, I'm sure he knew he did, because that was the plan from the beginning.
And he tells his Father, in his prayer, he tells him, I know this is from you and I have to go through this, but if there's any other way, Lord, please don't let it happen. We would have the same, and that was the human side of it. Does that show weakness? That shows common sense to me. How do we correct ourselves or keep ourselves from doing things that we're not supposed to? Does the punishment scare us? To some people it does. I had a federal court judge tell me one time he didn't used to believe in the death sentence, the death penalty, until he saw the same people coming back over and over and over in his federal courtroom that did felonies or committed felonies. That was not going to change. They kill people in prison. He said they did not deserve to be in the society at all. He said that's what changed my mind. When I became a judge, I did not believe in the death penalty until I saw those same people continue to do the terrible things. Let them out and they would do them again. Let them out and they'd do them again. They're not going to change. But the death penalty does deter lots of people. Going to prison deters lots of people.
Turns around means deter.
Yes, ma'am. Turns them around and decides to change. Yes, David.
I tell people sometimes that, you know, I want to mess with me because I could kill you. And I die of old age before they, you know, that's just a joke.
Right.
It's true.
Sure.
It takes 15 years. Well, I would tell you what the scripture says.
Oh, that's
And that's the deal now. They say they can't think past Thursday. But if Thursday was coming, they start thinking.
right. Yep. You're right. All right. Let's continue on. Now. Yes, ma'am.
You know, we know Christ was human and he was also divine, but seeing that human side of him, to me, is so impressive. The fact that he knew what was going to happen, and yet he prayed that it be taken away, but if not, God's will be done.
Yeah.
And
And that's the same prayer we have today too when we get a diagnosis of, say, cancer or someone's on the deathbed that, you know, Lord, if it be your will, please take this from us. Please let that person live. But we've got to understand if it's God's will, that's the way it's got to be. And here Jesus gives us that example. It's his will for these things to happen. All right, let's continue about the garden. Again, to know exactly what happened in the garden, you've got to read all the every place that it talks about it. Let's start in Matthew 26 first. Let's go to Matthew 26 when he was arrested. And there's a couple of things different happen, and if you read in one place, you're going to miss a lot. Matthew 26, 47 through 55, someone for me. Matthew 26, 47 through 55.
And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude of swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, whoever I kiss, he is the one. Take me. Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, friend, why have you come? And they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to him, put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen thus? In that hour Jesus said to the multitude, have you come out as against a robber with swords and gloves to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me.
Why did they do it at night? In the middle of the night, not just at night, in the middle of the night or early hours of the morning, which would be 1 or 2 o'clock for us. What would have happened if, and he just reminded them, if you had taken me, which I was there every day, if you had taken me in the temple, they knew what would have happened. They'd had a riot on their hands with me because Jesus was so popular.
You know, it's interesting that Roman law did not allow a trial to happen at night.
Exactly.
So this was illegal anyway.
Yep, all the way around. Nothing was right about this whole thing, was it?
Well, a capital trial. They might allow some trials, but
Now,
a capital murder trial couldn't happen.
right, and it had to go before the Romans. But now they're supposed to put him on trial. The religious people are supposed to put him on trial. Then he goes to the Roman trial. All right, Turn to Luke 22. We get a little more information in 22.
22 what?
Starting in verse 47. Read down through 52 or 53, please.
And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude.
Yes, sir. You're right place.
And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude, and he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, you are betraying the Son of Man with a kiss. And when those around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike them with a sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, permit even this, and he touched his ear and healed him. And when Jesus said to the chief priests, captains of the temple, and the elders who had come to him, have you come out against a robber with a sword and clubs, when I was with you daily in the temple, and you did not try to seize me? But this is your hour and the power of darkness.
Power of darkness.
Power of darkness, yes.
Yep.
How far did you go?
What did I say? I was looking ahead. I'm sorry. That was it. Okay. A little bit more gives us a little bit more indication of who was there and what they did. Let's go to John and let's look at John's account right quick. John 18. In John 18, it gives us now. This is the first place we see that actual troops or an army or an armed garrison came after him. Not just people. In the last three accounts, it just said people with clubs and swords, right? But it didn't say it was like, it tells us different in John's account. Somebody start in verse 1 of 18 and read down through, if they went through 11.
And Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the ravine of the Kidron, where there was a garden which he entered with his disciples. Now Judas also, who was betraying him, knew the place, where Jesus had often met there with his disciples.
How did Judas know where to find him? This is the first clue we get. This is a place they always went. Judas knew exactly where he was going to be at. Okay?
Judas then, having received the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with banners and torches and weapons, that Jesus, knowing all things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, whom do you seek?
Okay, now, in the other accounts it said what happened. Judas went up to him and kissed him to make sure that they could identify. But here it says Jesus came forward and confronted them and asked them. Okay, continue.
They answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. He said to them, I am he. And Judas also, who was betraying him, was standing with them. So when he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground.
Well, let's stop there for a second. Why did they fall? He used a term here that blew their minds. I am. He's used that term. What does that mean? Who did God identify himself as? I am. That's why they backed away and bowed down at that term. That was a holy term that you just did not use in modern day language or in modern day conversation. You didn't do that. But Jesus said, I am he. And that's what got their attention, and that's why those that were very religious knelt down in reverence to the words he had just said. All right, continue.
Therefore he again asked them, whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus the Nazarene. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these go their way, to fulfill the word which he spoke. Of those whom you have given me, I lost not one. Simon Peter then, having the sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. And the slave's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put the sword in your sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it?
All right. Jesus is accepted at this point here in John's version. Jesus accepted his fate right here, didn't he? He said, I have accepted it. All right. Never says anything about Judas coming up and kissing him on the cheek. Does that mean that there is conflict between Matthew, Mark, and Luke and in John? What does it just mean? John didn't write it. It very easily happened, and it did happen. It just didn't. That was one of the important parts that that John thought needed to be in there. Okay.
People that point out things like that in order to try to prove that the Bible is not true,
Right.
they would do the same thing to the whole history books and all of them exactly what it was saying.
I was reading a deal the other day about Julius Caesar. There are more documents outside of the Bible that proves that Jesus lived than there are of Julius Caesar. But yet they have no problem believing Julius Caesar lived. There's like 10 times the amount of writing outside the Bible in secular history that Jesus was there.
Whatever goes to Caesar goes to Caesar. Or you ever have that saying?
Right, yeah. Whatever Caesar's, get rendered into Caesar, what is Caesar's? All right. Also, there was a Roman document of the I think he was like a sheriff or like a appointed deal that writes back to Rome, and they found it in some of the documents in Rome that makes asking Rome on how to handle these followers of this man that we put to death. Doesn't call him by name, but how do I handle these followers that calls themselves Christians? Well, who in the world are they talking about? That's in Roman documents that Jesus actually existed. And we got all these people claiming, oh, Jesus never existed anyway. He's just a made-up guy.
I often wonder what went through their minds when he put the ear back on for 20 minutes.
That would have stopped me dead in my tracks right there.
No joke.
But they were so blinded with rage and wanted to get him. Because here in a few minutes, we're not going to have time to get to it today, but what is he going to be accused of? What does the religious leaders of the day accuse him of and convict him of? Blasphemy. What is blasphemy? What now?
Claiming to be God or something.
Claiming to be God or doing something against the religious teachings of the day. All right? And they got him mostly for, what did Jesus say he was going to do with the temple? And then build it back in 3 days. Well, now you've blasphemed against the temple, is what they tell us. You cannot say ugly things or bad things about God's temple.
We've been working on 40 years and ain't got it yet.
That was the two false witnesses. They had a whole bunch of them, but none of them could ever say they heard him say it. They finally had 2 of them come up and say, yeah, we heard him say that he was going to destroy the temple. Half the story, right? He said he's...
If you were a false witness in that time and you were caught in a lie, you were put to death.
Sure.
They did have a hard time finding somebody.
Oh, exactly. Because everyone should have known and probably did know this is going to go beyond us. It's going to go to the Roman because we can't put him to death without the Romans say so. So it was going to go to the Roman authorities. And if you got caught by the Romans lying in court, man, they were very serious. But these 2 guys, I guess the money got Judas, didn't it? And that was they bribed people often. Any different than today? I often wondered how many people how much they get paid off in court cases to lie. Just flat out lie. They're paying the lawyers anyway who was lying to start with, most of them. And that just drives me crazy. No, it would a lot be more truth, wouldn't it? All right, let's go back to Mark. I want to go to Mark 51 to 52. It's a little added part that kind of blows people away. Somebody read Mark 51 and 52, and we're going to stop after we do that. Yes.
There followed him a certain young man.
Yes, ma'am, that's it.
And there followed him a certain young man having a linen cloth cast about his naked body, and the young man laid hold on him, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked.
What is that? Where does that come from? That is, that's just an added little what? Guess who that probably had to be. Who is writing this? Who's writing this book? Mark. Who else would have known that happened if he was by himself and he fled and someone grabbed at him and grabbed the sheep and then pulled his clothes off and he took off running and went on? No one else saw that but Mark. He's the one writing the book. God allowed him to put that little tidbit of information in there. Lots of scholars think that Jesus, the man who was carrying the vase of water, and they had the ate at their house, the Passover feast and all that, was Mark's house. That's what a lot of people, not a lot of scholars, there is no way to prove that. But a lot of scholars think it was because of this one section, this one little part that Mark is allowed to put in the Gospels. He was the one that was running away. I don't know if I would want to write that down or not, if that was me. How many people running around through well, we got a lot more doing that today. First one I saw was, streaker I ever saw, was an SFA football game. Guy come running across the field, of course, didn't have anything on. If you ever know anything about SFA's football stadium, there's huge high fences all around that thing. He got to the fence, could not get over. They handcuffed him to the fence for about 45 minutes. And it was like 32 degrees.
Oh, man.
And they said, well, we can't get a car over here right now. They let him sit out there. That's just a side story. So he thought he was going to be, do something real great, but it didn't turn out so great. And I think streaking, they said, with SFA was one of the first places it started, because they would go up to Brookshire's, which was next door to the university, and get their carts, the buggies, and then they would pile up in a buggy and have races down between her dorm and my dorm where we lived. And I didn't know what was going on. I heard all these people hollering. I went out there and looked. And I said, oh, these idiots don't have any clothes on. And I thought it was so good the first one crashed with those people in there. Talking about road rash. They had it. So, anyway.
Ray Stevens with his song, Don't Look at Them.
Yeah. But that's just one of those odd things that is put in Scripture from time to time. It's there for a reason. It's to give us some information or insight on something that happened. And I wanted to address that before we finished, because like I say, that's one of those places. Of course, they arrest Jesus. They take him in front of the high priest. And the high priest at the time used the false witnesses. Finally found two guys that said they heard him say that he was going to destroy the temple, and then but they didn't tell him he'd build it back in 3 days. They just said he was going to destroy the temple. And that's what they convicted him of religiously, is he blasphemed against the temple. And that's what they used. And of course, from everything from then on, the Romans knew he was innocent. Romans knew he didn't do a thing. I don't know, again, next week if it will continue on with Jesus' trial, with his crucifixion. I just don't know. I haven't seen the lessons yet. So.
He was talking about Jesus with the ear back and healed it. A lot of the men in the church probably never saw it.
May not have.
So I can't imagine what it's like for them to go ahead and arrest him.
I see a commanding officer having to order them to put their hands on him and arrest him. So, whoa, wait a minute. What did it say, too? He could have done what? A legion or 10,000 angels he could have called. Yeah. He could have called 72,000 angels. Yeah. That death angel is pretty bad, isn't he? All he could take is just one to do that. And Christ himself, I think, had the ability or power to do that too, but he wouldn't use it. I don't know. I don't know if God gave him that power in the human form. I just don't know. But he had incredible. These people saw the incredible work Jesus did. Most all of them witnessed some type of a miracle that he did, but it didn't faze them at all. We know people like that today, don't we?
Because he was just the carpenter's son.
Yeah, there's no way. And it says over and over, who,
But it wasn't God's plan.
Sure it was. Sure it was. And he predicted it. He prophesied it from the time Adam and Eve sinned. He prophesied from all the way up to Jesus' time that these things were going to happen. And it just right over them. Yes, sir.
Some of the judges knew good and well who he was, but they would lose their job. They would lose their positions.
They were more earthly than spiritual. And that's what we've got to guard against. And that's what a lot of this teaches us. we've got to be very, very careful about how hard we want to hang on to this earth and hang on to the things we've got. Scott's lesson today. Give up everything. And I don't think there's not a person in here that would not do everything they could to help another brother or sister in this congregation. It gets a little harder to help those outside the congregation. You have to be a little more, I think, on your toes, a little more discerning at times about things. And I fear for if Tammy's with me and I want to stop and help somebody, I fear for her, and I would not stop with small children. I just couldn't. But I have stopped many times and offered to call somebody for them. You don't have to get out and do things for them, change the tire for them. It's a lady, I would, but we've all heard kind of stories. Somebody hiding, especially when it's dark, and come. One of the first acts of kindness I saw a man do. Some of y'all may have known Bill Nobles. Grew up, had a store in Diana, right across from the post office now. That was one of the first jobs I ever had working. Me and his son was the same age. And he got me a job stocking shelves and sacking groceries and things like that. There was a man came in, and you could tell he had scars all over his head. Him and his family had stopped to help somebody, and somebody was hiding. And jumped out and hit him with a tire iron in his head, and it crushed his skull, part of his skull, and head. And he was struggling, just trying to get to wherever they were going. And I watched that man hire him for 2 or 3 weeks to come in and do things for him and paid him. And the guy would not take anything for free. He said, I'm going to work for you. I'll do what I can. Of course, he had some abilities, problems then. But that's the first time I can remember. And I was probably 14 at the time. I can remember that's what Jesus is talking about, helping your fellow man. And I've always remembered that.
My grade school principal at Dangerfield's name.
Oh, yeah. Yep, got quite a few around here. Again, I appreciate your comments today. And Scott will be back next week. So, thank you very much.